Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my humble home here in Livingston, Montana. Okay, the date today is 11/11/2020, meaning Veterans Day. That's what my PC's telling me anyway. Veterans Day all day today. Okay, so for Veterans Day, I thought for a change, I'd tell another war story. This is meant to be funny, but I'm going to tell you this before I get started in here. Let me have a little drink of coffee. Okay, there's been many Veterans Days that have went by. I mean dozens of them, where I just sat at home all alone, crying in my beer, so to speak, and feeling unappreciated because us Vietnam veterans back in the day were unappreciated and we weren't treated very well. But you take like today, it's a little afternoon here in Livingston, Montana, and I've already had 3 happy Veterans Day calls, one from my son and one from my wife. She didn't call me, she's in the house here, and one from my sister down in southern Idaho, which made me feel lots better. But I can guarantee you there's been many years that have gone by in the past where none of the above happened, But I'm not sitting here to whine about that because everybody realizes, or if you don't realize it, Vietnam was a cluster you-know-what, and I don't care what anybody says. That was definitely a war that didn't need be, and especially the way us veterans were treated. But what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to tell a funny war story like I told the other day. A little jocularity into this program ain't going to hurt none, especially with what's been going on in the United States with this stupid election and all this other stuff. Okay, now some of you are going to take insult to this story, and some of you might laugh, and some of you probably don't care, and which makes me a storyteller that, I wish I had an audience that had humor or something like that, something along those lines. Okay. In my unit, the way the old man, the CO, the commanding officer, had things, about every 10 to 12 days, anybody that was an E4 or under, it depended on what job you had with the unit and all that, but you got stuck on guard duty. And guard duty was one great big pain in the rear end because it was hot, there was bugs, and all of this stuff. Guard duty, it always worked this way. It started at 1,600 hours for you civilian types. That's 4 p.m. That's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we'd have to be on guard duty for 24 hours until the next day at 4 p.m. and then we were relieved. And the way they worked it is you were on guard duty for 4 hours and off for 4 hours. On for 4 and off for 4. That doesn't sound very bad, but you didn't get any sleep. With the bugs and the mosquitoes. Those mosquitoes over there were about twice as big as the mosquitoes here in North America. Anywhere you can think of. I mean, these were some big suckers. I always used to joke to myself, if 4 or 5 of them latched onto me, they could carry me away, And of course, those mosquitoes were carrying malaria, and we had, snakes and rats running around and all kinds of weird stuff. Vietnam was a very weird place to be at night, Now, the thing of it is, night never lasted very long where I was at because I was out in the flats. Our unit sat right on top of an old swamp, i.e. rice paddy. And what would happen is that old sun, and we were right on the equator. The old sun was about this big around, is what it looked like when it started to come up in the east. And it would start coming up about 4:30 in the morning, no kidding. And then when it set in the west, it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and it never really got pitch black, where I was anyway, till midnight. So you really only had about 4 hours of darkness, and the rest of the time it was, lighting up to kind of see what you were doing, you know. Okay. Because I was an E4, I had enough rank to man an M60 machine gun. And I hate that word gun because some drill sergeants taught us there's no such a thing as a gun. We used to call it an M60. This M60 was a fully automatic belt-fed 308. It was my absolute, the Rambo rifle, you know, that Sylvester Stallone had in First Blood. That was an M60, belt-fed, fully automatic 308. And that thing was nasty, man. You know, it spit out about 600 rounds a minute, something like that. The only problem is with that M60, you know, after you ripped a few belts through it and whatnot, the barrel would start getting hot and it would bend. And when that barrel started bending, you had to change. You had to put on some asbestos gloves and twist that barrel off and stick a new one on and all this other stuff. Okay, I'm out there on bunker guard duty, i.e. M60 duty, and the way our bunker set up, we had you had a guy like me that run the 60, and you had an assistant. And usually that assistant was a PFC, one rank lower than me, so which that made me the boss out there, you know. And anyway, we're out there. It got dark, and me and my compadre were just, you know, BSing, telling stories. Joking back and forth, doing whatever, you know, kind of keeping a low profile and everything. And pretty soon this buddy of mine says, "Hey, Boren," he says, "Hey, aren't you supposed to set off one of them white phosphorus flares every once in a while?" Now, for you guys that don't know what a white phosphorus flare is, it was a tube about an inch in diameter, okay, maybe just a little bit bigger than that, and about a foot long, 14 inches long, something like that. Okay, and then the way it worked, there was two caps on each end, but you took the one cap off like this, turned it around and put it on the other end, and inside here was a spike, like a nail, that would set off a primer right here. Got it? You put it in here like this, and you took that tube and you hold it in your hand like this, and you'd smack it on something hard, like a rock or something, you know, and you really didn't have to be too perfect with your aim, because the whole idea is this, when you bang that on something hard, a little rocket would take off, a white phosphorus rocket, if you will. Well, that little rocket I don't think was powered by white phosphorus, but it would go up, oh good God, man, it would go up probably about, I want to say 75 yards, probably up in the air or something like that, 3/4 the length of a football field. And then a parachute would open up, you know, a parachute about this big around, you know, I'd say, you know, I don't know, maybe 3 feet across, something like that. And it dangling at the end of the ropes, the little tiny ropes and everything, was a burning piece of white phosphorus that would light up the whole perimeter. That was the whole idea, was that this thing would light up your area in front of you where maybe an assault was going to come from. Well, the area that we were facing was all swamp, and I knew it was all BS, because if anybody was going to come through that swamp, I more than likely was going to hear it. You know, and I was one of those kind of guys, after I was in the NOM for a while, I didn't set off them flares. Why? Because you're giving yourself away, you know. But this buddy of mine tells me, he says, "Hey, Boren, aren't you supposed to set off them flares?" And I go, "Yeah, well, I really don't like to, because blah, 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 for the reasons I just told you, you know, but it kind of gives your position away, and it was really no advantage that I could see, not where we were at, you know." So we got to talking about these flares and everything, and he says, "I'll bet you haven't even set off that many." And I looked at him and I said, "Look here, pal, I've set off more of these flares than you've got." Then Carter's got liver pills, because by that time, you know, I'd been in NOM for a while, and I'd set off enough of them stupid things, you know. Anyway, we continued on talking about those flares and what they could do and what they couldn't do. And this guy tells me, he says, how far do you think one of them will shoot? And I says, well, what do you mean? Up, straight up in the air, or lobbing it across land, or what's the deal, you know? Excuse me. Hang on here for a second. I got to give me another guzzle of coffee here. So I told him what I thought. I said, I figure they go about 75, they go about 75 yards, something like that, straight up in the air, or pretty, you know, you couldn't shoot them straight up in the air, but on a slight incline, you know. And he goes, well, distance-wise, what do you think you could make with them? And I go, I thought about it, and I go, well, you know, I really don't know, because I don't. When I do decide to set one of them up, I don't shoot it that way, you know. And he goes, so he's looking out across that swamp about 100 yards. Come on, I didn't measure, guys. I wasn't out there slopping around that swamp all the time. But about 100 yards away, there was the village of Phulam, Phulam. And it was only, the village of Phulam consisted of about 50 hutches, you know, hooches, you know, and they were just bamboo poles basically, and they had a rice thatch roof and that kind of stuff. You would be absolutely surprised how third world that those Vietnamese people were. I mean, they could live on practically nothing. It just absolutely amazed me, you know, the way they were pretty ingenious little buzzards too, you know. Anyway, this guy starts running his mouth. I always love people that like to run their mouth and got nothing to say. But that's what he does start doing. He says, I'll bet you a $20 bill that you can't take one of these white phosphorus flares and make it across that swamp. And I says, you're on, pal. You know, because I knew dang well I'd fired enough of those things to know, you know, what the deal was. So, you know, here I am with a flare like this, you know, and I take the end off and put it on the charging end, you know, like that. And I made sure I got me a rock about this big around, you know, good flat rock, and I kind of propped it up and got it on about the right angle, and I'm sitting there like this, you know, looking over there towards that village and everything. And my plan was to not do any harm to anybody, okay? You got that? Kind of the way it didn't end up, but anyway, I get everything all lined up, and man, I'm sitting there and I'm taking my time, and you know, I'm getting this angle thing just right and all this other stuff. And like I say, from here on out, what I've got to say, I did not mean to do this, but it happened, okay? Anyway, I go, poof, like that. You know, once I figured I had everything lined up, I struck that striker end, you know, and boy, that old white phosphorus rocket flare took off, you know, on I'd say at about a 30-degree angle, you know, because I knew I had to really stretch her out there to make the edge. And my plan was to have that land right on the edge of the village, you know, right about where the swamp ended. Well, now, my aim was a little bit too good. Now listen to me. Now, what happened is that... Here's the part where people either get love or hate. That white phosphorus flare came right smack down. I could just see this thing just perfect, you know. And it came right down on one of them rice thatch bamboo hooches, you know. And believe you me, it didn't take very long to erect one of those things. They're very simple structures and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden, you know, I could see that white phosphorus, because that white phosphorus you can't put it out. It has to burn itself out, literally. But I could see that fire starting to build up on that roof. And all of a sudden, I heard a bunch of Vietnamese over there swearing and jumping around, like a bunch of Indians around the campfire and all that. And in just a matter of minutes, I mean, I'm telling you, just in a matter of minutes, that old hooch just, whoof. I mean, it was on fire, And like I say, those Vietnamese, we used to call them dinks. Sorry, I'm trying not to be racist here, but that's what we used to call them. We used to call them worse names than that. But all of a sudden, they were over there dancing and carrying on, and they're number 10 GI. You could see in the light of the fire, them shaking their hands, and do Miami, do Miami. Now I know that sounds very weird, but that meant mofo. You know what I'm talking about in Vietnamese, and they had they, like I say, they were just dancing around the campfire like a bunch of North American Indians, And all of a sudden I hear Boren, and then I look over and there's the old OD, officer of the day, the man you got to answer up to when you're on guard duty. He goes, "Hey, look here, Boren." He says, what's going on over there with them dinks, That's what he said, And I... Look, man, I had to put on, I'm not an actor of any kind, but I had to put on the best act that you ever seen because he'd have hung me out to dry, man, if he really knew the truth of the matter. And I go, gee, sir, I've been wondering that myself. I was sitting down there by my 60, I says, you know what I think? And this was like 2 o'clock in the morning, folks, 2 o'clock in the morning, He says, you know what I think's happening over there, sir? He says, I think the dinks are having a barbecue. Having a barbecue. I done burnt down one of them hooches, Totally did not mean to do it, I wasn't aiming purposely, but that's what happened, And that old officer of the day stood there and he was standing up, above the bunker and looking over there and he goes, I'll be danged. I don't know why they'd be out here. And he started just kind of mumbling to himself. Accepted my accepted my excuse about, a barbecue, Tell you the truth of the matter, those Vietnamese, I don't think they knew very much about barbecuing anyway, but that's the fastest thing that I could think of, But I'm going to tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen. That idiot that was serving with me, that was my assistant gunner, he never gave me any more crap about, what I could do and what I could not do with those white phosphorus flares. Okay, there is my... And nobody got killed and nobody died or nothing like that. So it took me a little bit of guts to tell the story because I know I'll be hated, but then I'm used to it, because I'm a Vietnam veteran. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Hope everybody's having a happy Veterans Day. Take care of yourselves. We shall see you on down the trail. And adios, my friends. And I got to figure out how to get out of here like usual.